This happened to me back in late November when I was 18. I was at the Walden Galleria Mall in Buffalo just doing some early Christmas shopping for my family. I like to get my Christmas shopping over with. I also like going to the mall during Christmas time because of the decorations and general vibe. Something about shopping when that Christmas feeling is in the air makes it more enjoyable to me. I had like 3 bags with me already. I stopped in Victoria's Secret, Zara, and Sephora. I got my brother and dad something from Zara and my sister and mom's stuff from Sephora. I also got myself a bunch of stuff. I'd already been in the mall for hours and I wanted to just sit and collect myself. I sat on one of the benches not far from the tall tree that the mall puts up every year. There were still people in the mall, but it was closing soon, so there were less and less with each passing minute. A man came and sat down next to me. He cracked a joke at first, which I laughed at. He seemed like this innocent older guy, like 62 or something. He reminded me honestly of a skinny Santa Claus, ironically. We talked for a couple of minutes. The things he said that mainly stuck out to me were him talking about how he'd been coming to this mall since it opened and how he was scared it was going to shut down. He said I looked like his daughter and then showed me a picture of her on his phone. I didn't see a resemblance at all, to be honest. In fact, the girl looked absolutely nothing like me or him for that matter. It was also a picture of a girl who looked like she was 18. He looked like he could have been her grandfather, honestly. Eventually, I felt it was time to leave, so I slightly awkwardly got up and said goodbye and walked away. I didn't look back to see if he was watching me. I like to avoid awkwardness in every way. I got to my car and started my drive home. I live only about 10 minutes from the mall. My family has several homes, and it's often that I'm alone with just my brother in this house. This was one of those spans of time. This night was a Thursday, I believe. My brother goes to University of Buffalo and often goes out Thursday nights. This night was no exception. Our house is in a cul-de-sac with 2 other big houses, and when I turned right into the cul-de-sac, I looped around to our house. This cul-de-sac is unusual. It isn't one big open court. It has a circular patch of grass with some trees in the middle, so it more so resembles a roundabout. Around this time, right before pulling into the driveway, I got a message on my phone. It said, "AirTag found moving with you." I panicked, but instead of pulling into the driveway, I looped around and drove back down the street just in case I was being tracked. I had to make sure this AirTag was actually in or on my car. I figured out how to make the AirTag make a noise, and partially expecting it to come from the outside of the car, I heard a beeping sound coming from one of my shopping bags. I dug through the bag and pulled out an AirTag, actually feeling like throwing up. I put the car back in drive and drove further down the block, where I chucked the AirTag out the window. Then I turned around and floored it back to the house. I drove into the driveway and ran inside where I opened the garage, hoping to hide the car in there. But my mom's car was in there. I had no choice but to leave the car outside. I closed the garage door and locked the front door. I called my brother Cody for safe measures, just letting him know what happened. He said if anyone comes to the house, call him. Him saying that alone scared me, especially hearing in his tone that he wasn't kidding, but he also sounded kind of drunk. I went to the living room and tried to just take my mind off of it, but I wouldn't have written this if that's where it ended. The sound of the doorbell made me sick immediately. It was like in the back of my mind I was dreading it, and it happened. Followed by the doorbell was 3 loud, distinct knocks. I slowly walked over to the door, like tiptoeing, and I stopped when a slightly muffled man's voice on the other side said, "Hey, Ashley, I think you might have my AirTag." And it all hit me instantly. It was that man from the mall. He probably purposely threw his AirTag into my Sephora bag to stalk me home. He saw me through the textured glass. When I guess he saw me hurrying away, I heard him yell that he promises he dropped the AirTag in there by accident. I didn't listen to a word he said. Even if he was telling the truth, the AirTag wasn't in my house and he'd have seen that. It meant he saw me go to the house, and that's all he wanted. I called Cody again, and at first he thought I was joking, but when he heard I was serious, he said he was on his way home. The downtown bars are not far away, so I'd only have to wait maybe 10 minutes. When I peeked back at the door, I could no longer see the man through the glass. Maybe he was gone, I thought. I went to the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. I was trying not to think about the man at the door. I just waited for Cody, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked over, but now I didn't see anything. I sat there trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the man left. Somehow I did briefly convince myself of that, but after a minute or two of watching TV, I heard the same voice from outside that window say, "I love it when they play dumb." I looked and he was standing right outside the window, his face pressed against the glass. He smiled when he saw me notice him. It was that old man from the mall. He lifted his hand and tapped on the window, then said, "Don't pretend you don't know I'm watching you." I called Cody and yelled into the phone that the man was at the window. He said he was almost home and told me to call 911. So I hung up and did just that. The man just kept standing there watching me, smiling like this was a game, and I couldn't take it anymore. So I left the living room to the office where there were no windows. A few minutes later, I heard Cody pull into the driveway. Cody ran inside, but when we looked back at the window, the man was gone. The cop who arrived searched but found no footprints or anything. The cop was not very familiar with the process for reporting an AirTag, but he gave me a police report number to use, and he suggested contacting Apple to start the process of tracking the owner. The next day I tried that, but it turned out it would be a much more involved legal process than I was expecting. When I simply didn't hear or see anything else for a couple of weeks, I just lost interest. Maybe the man saw my brother and cops arrive, so he bailed and didn't come back. But to be honest, I have thought back on this and on the girl's pictures on his phone, and I hope to God that wasn't another girl who he potentially kidnapped or worse. I truly hope that was just a random girl's picture he took off social media or something. This experience changed me for the worse. I'm not the same person I was before it all happened, and I fear I never will be again. My name is Claire. This didn't happen so long ago that I've forgotten about it, but it's not like it happened last week either. I no longer live where this story took place, so that's why I feel comfortable talking about it now. I had just moved to a new city for a promotion at work. It wasn't anything too exciting, just your standard mid-sized city. It was a Tuesday evening when the first strange thing happened. I was driving home from work, which mind you is just a short commute, and I was listening to a podcast when my phone buzzed. It was a notification I had never seen before. AirTag found moving with you. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had dropped their keys in the parking lot, or maybe it was just one of my friends playing a prank. But as soon as I opened the notification, I was horrified. The app said the AirTag had been moving with me for over an hour. That meant it had been in my car the entire commute, or worse, in the parking lot before I even got in. I checked the back seat, under the seats, in the glove compartment, and even in the trunk. But there was nothing, no AirTag. And beyond that, there was nothing unfamiliar or out of place either. I instantly knew what was going on. Someone had placed an AirTag in my car, and whoever it was knew where I went. Worse, they knew where I was. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. Unable to find the AirTag, I had no choice but to drive home, meaning I'd be leading a potential stalker directly to my apartment, but I had no other option. Once I got home, I checked my car again, this time more thoroughly. I still couldn't find it, though, despite my phone insisting it was there. The logical part of me wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What could they do? There was no device to show them, and even if there was no direct evidence of who had placed it. I calmed myself down with some reassuring facts. My apartment had decent security, so it wasn't the end of the world if someone knew where I lived, and it wasn't like I could undrive home. Whoever the AirTag belonged to already knew my location, which no police or anyone else could change, so I tried to ignore it. The next morning, I drove to work as usual. The notification popped up again when I got to work, but I ignored it. Despite my efforts, I didn't get much done that day. I couldn't stop thinking about the stupid AirTag. I kept checking my back seat, trunk, and glove compartment every few minutes. It was exhausting, but the worst part was not knowing why. I didn't know who had put it there or what they wanted. The suspense was unbearable. The following week, I received a second notification. The AirTag was still moving with me. I was terrified. I contacted Apple support and gave them the serial number. I explained what was happening, and they suggested I contact the police, which I finally did. They promised to look into it. A few days later, the notifications stopped. I never saw the AirTag again, and I never found out who had placed it there. But the experience had left me shaken. I still get nervous whenever I feel someone might be following me or watching me. It made me realize how vulnerable we can be, even when we think we're safe. That is the full story of what happened. I never found the man from the mall again, and I never received a follow-up from the police. I try to move on with my life, but the memory is still fresh. It changed how I view strangers, security, and the world,